Selamat pagi, Ibu Bapak sekalian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and also a very good evening also to some of you who are accessing this event from the other part of the globe. Welcome back, everyone. Please welcome back to everyone to the fourth webinar of the Indonesia Gas Society. Thank you to all of you who already joined in this webinar. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Rahmat Dewanto, the Secretary General of Indonesia Gas Society, who is also working in the commercial division of Pertamina Hulu Indonesia. In the next approximately 2 hours, I will become the moderator for this event. This is the fourth webinar of Indonesia Gas Society. On behalf of IGS, we call it Indonesia Gas Society also as IGS. On behalf of IGS, we would like to express sincere gratitude to our honorable guests from a very respectable institution. The first one, Mr. Alec Dewar, as the Senior Director, Center for Energy Impact, Boston Consulting Group, based in Washington, D.C. The next one is Ms. Asti Nuraini Asra, the Principal Analyst, Asia Pacific Gas and LNG Wood Mackenzie, based in Singapore. And last but not least, Mr. Eddie Martono Chin, the principal at the Boston Consulting Group. Before we proceed with the event, I would like to give a brief explanation about the Indonesian Gas Society. Mas Budi, if you can share the couple of pages of presentation. The Indonesia Gas Society is a non-profit organization that supports the development of the Indonesia gas industry, from the upstream, midstream to downstream, which includes a commercial, technical, operational, and HSSE aspect. The IGS was established in June 2014 and acknowledged as the active member of the International Gas Union. The vision of IGS is becoming an independent, effective, and reliable organization of energy professionals to facilitate close and effectual collaboration among stakeholders towards advancing the Indonesian gas industry through sound policies and strategies and improve human quality, business process and practices, and new technologies. And to achieve our vision, we promote natural gas as a key source of sustainable energy, provide the strategic input to the policymakers, promote the development of the gas industry through all stakeholders, facilitate the equitable distribution of information and technology related to the gas industry in Indonesia, and finally provide benefit for all members. So next slide is thanks to all IGS members who continue to support our events, including these webinars. Please, the next slide. Yes, this is our thanks to all of them for the support of the IGS. So thanks again to all of you who are joining this event. There are currently over 254 participants who already registered, and there are 76 participants who are joining in the Zoom. So, ladies and gentlemen, from the 3 successful webinars of IGS on 9th of May, 16th of May, and the latest one on 6th of June, the topics covering the impact of COVID-19 and particularly low oil price to the LNG supply demand in the Asia Pacific region, and especially to the LNG and gas business in Indonesia, including to the industry. From those 3 successful webinars, we have seen that various factors such as growing new supply, lower demand, growing renewable energy, environmental issue have changed the landscape of gas industry. The gas is now becoming abundant on supply side, but the needs for cleaner energy and the affordability of gas is expected to be a push factor to promote more utilization of gas, especially in our country, Indonesia. In this webinar, we would like to update the landscape of gas and LNG industry and to discuss more on the available opportunity for the gas utilization in Indonesia. We will have 3 brief presentations followed by short Q&A session at the end of each presentation. And Finally, we hope to have more discussion with all the speakers at the end of the session. Therefore, I'm inviting the audience to post the question either in the chat provided in the Zoom or chat in the live streaming YouTube.
Suaranya nggak terdengar, Pak.
Sorry.
Masih biar kenyang. Bunuh dulu kalau gaduh-gaduh dimarahin sama nenek.
Sorry. Selamat pagi, Bu Bapak sekalian. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very good night also to some of you who are accessing this event from the other part of the globe. Welcome back, everyone, to the fourth webinar of the Indonesia Gas Society. Thank you to all of you who already joined in this webinar. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Rahmat Dewanto, the Secretary General of Indonesia Gas Society, who is also working in the commercial division of Pertamina Indonesia, Pertamina Hulu Indonesia. In the next 2 hours, I will become the moderator for this event. This event is the fourth webinar of Indonesia Gas Society. So on behalf of IGS, we would like to express a sincere gratitude to our honorable guests from a very respectable institution. The first one, Mr. Alex Ewer, as the Senior Director for Consulting Group based in Washington, D.C. The next one is Ms. Asti Nuraini Asra, the Principal Analyst Asia Pacific Gas and LNG with McKinsey based in Singapore. And last but not least, Mr. Edi Martono, Chin, the principal at the Boston Consulting Group. I think we already introduced the brief explanation about Indonesia Gas Society in the slide. So thanks to all IGS members who continue to support our event, including this webinar. Thanks again to all of you who are joining this event. Currently, there are 254 participants who already registered through YouTube, and 86 now is still counting who access via Zoom. Thanks to all of you. So ladies and gentlemen, from 3 successful webinars on 9th of May, 16th of May, and the latest one, 6th of June, the topics of covering impact of COVID-19 and low oil price to the LNG supply demand in the Asia Pacific region, and particularly to the LNG and gas business in Indonesia. We have seen that various factors such as growing new supply, lower demand, growing renewable, environmental issue have changed the landscape of the gas industry. The gas is now becoming abundant on supply side, but the needs for cleaner energy and the affordability of gas is expected to be a push factors to promote more utilization of gas, especially in Indonesia. In this webinar, we would like to update you the landscape of gas and LNG industry and to discuss more on the available opportunity for the gas utilization in Indonesia. We will have 3 brief presentations followed by short Q&A at the end of each session, and we do hope that we will have more discussion at the end of the session. Therefore, I'm inviting the audience to post the questions either in the chat provided in the Zoom or in the chat provided in the YouTube streaming. We will collect your question at the end of each session. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are experiencing now the slowdown of economics due to the COVID-19, this is what is happening in Jakarta. We just entered into new lockdown starting this week. The other part of the world is also recovering. The question is, what will be the impact to the LNG and gas demand globally? Apart from COVID-19 issue itself, what are the other factors that will influence to the future of gas and LNG industry? So we have a very dependable guest here to explain the updated situation and some important factors that influence the gas and LNG demands. He was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University, where he earned a Master Science in Environmental Change and Management, and also a Master Science in Economic and Social History with distinction. He graduated summa cum laude with the BA in Political Science from Wheaton College, Massachusetts. He held several energy and climate policy analyst roles before joining Boston Consulting Group 11 years ago, and now he's working with the clients globally across the energy industry. He's now leading the analysis of natural gas, climate change, and energy transition topics impacting energy industry clients. Please welcome Alex Jewell, the Senior Director of Boston Consulting Group Center for Energy Impact. Please, Alex, the time is yours.
Great. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. Thanks everybody for joining this session. Really excited to engage with you and speak about this topic. I was able to be in Jakarta just less than 2 years ago, I think, at the Pertamina Energy Forum. Had a wonderful time there and on many other occasions in Indonesia. So unfortunately, everything is virtual these days. So, bear with me, bear with us on this. I'll be very brief here in terms of running through our view of global gas market dynamics, how COVID-19 is impacting that, really to set the scene for, I think, what will be a great discussion around opportunities within Indonesia. So I'll be quick here on the content. Please post questions as we go through it. Fundamentally, I think to lay the groundwork here on global gas market dynamics, it's critical to focus on the role that LNG is having in global market dynamics. LNG now really touches the vast majority of the leading gas markets globally. 27 now of the top 30 gas markets in the world are either exporters or importers of LNG. The role of LNG in setting prices is now truly significant. Almost half of global gas is priced on an index that is at least heavily influenced by LNG supply dynamics. And LNG has been by far and away the fastest growing segment of the global gas industry, growing at over 10% per year since 2016 versus less than 1% for non-LNG based gas demand. So clearly, the LNG market is the center of, becoming the center now of driving global gas market dynamics, and that will be the case for the foreseeable. So I think for the interest of time here, really we'll focus on the evolving nature of global LNG market dynamics and what that means for gas more generally in the world. I think I would be remiss speaking about LNG market dynamics without first making some observations about the impact of COVID-19 and how that is really shaping our outlook. Very clearly here, we're seeing an impact on the demand side and gas demand overall impacting LNG, less so actually than pipeline gas and domestic supply in many markets. Nonetheless, this year we're on track now for what will be the first decline in LNG demand globally in almost a decade, returning roughly to levels seen sometime between 2018 and 2019. And that's, of course, a significant shift from where we were averaging more than 10% growth in the prior years. But looking forward, when we think about the fundamental drivers of LNG market demand and how we start to recover from the COVID-19 impacts on the market, our view is there are many very strong reasons to see continued robust growth in global LNG demand. Number one, LNG really benefits from primary energy demand growth, particularly in Asia, and that is expected to remain strong. The question is really one of timing, not so much of the scale of that growth going forward. And ultimately, our view is COVID-19 is, of course, impacting things in the short run here, but primary energy demand growth expected to rebound very strongly going forward. And then a number of other factors actually are quite strong and really does not change, COVID-19 does not change our view quite significantly yet. In terms of established LNG markets, the policy-driven fuel switching opportunities driven by technology developments, the demand for cleaner air, those are likely to continue, along with investments in gas mid and downstream infrastructure. And in some ways, lower costs of debt are potentially likely to help facilitate that growth going forward. And then looking at new markets for LNG, there's substantial opportunity, of course, to continue expanding the number of countries that are able to access LNG. And there, in terms of investments in regas capacity, as well as new small-scale LNG value chains, that those are promising signs going forward. So fundamentally, our outlook really for the longer term has not changed substantially. In terms of bringing some real data points to this, what has actually been impacted? What can we observe so far in terms of any sort of signs for how long-term demand dynamics are likely to be shaped by COVID-19? I think there's some mixed evidence to date. The only worrying signs we've seen really are in China, where they have slowed some of their coal to gas switching, and they've delayed some of their regas facilities. So far, these seem to be temporary impacts or temporary decisions that are, going to impact the market in the next few years, not long term. So I think hard to say yet that China is moving away from gas in any particular way with those specific moves. Otherwise, though, I think there's actually a number of positive signs. In India, move towards supporting gas adoption, strengthening and accelerating the pace of that adoption actually coming out of COVID-19. And South Korea, for example, as well, stronger environmental policies and their green stimulus measure going forward. So ultimately, the story on the demand side for LNG is a very positive one. And it really is likely to be shaped, that growth is likely to be shaped by non-OECD Asian markets going forward. Those are really going to be the growth engines for the global LNG market coming forward. And, we think that despite COVID-19 having a short-term, very significant impact on the market, the long-term fundamentals remain strong. The question, though, that is much more significant in some ways or less clear is really then around the supply side for LNG. We know, and I think you've discussed on some of the prior webinars, that there is substantial new capacity coming online. Ultimately, we don't see a lot of that being delayed as a result of COVID-19. There are some projects that are being pushed out that are already underway, but fundamentally, I think the impact overall on capacity is not that substantial. In effect, we forecast probably about 50 MTPA less supply in 2025 than what would have otherwise been expected before COVID-19. And much of that is still capacity that will come online just a year or two later, being pushed out either for operational reasons in terms of delays to projects, or more likely, in most instances, commercial reasons, given the supply surplus situation that we're in the market today. Beyond just those projects, those LNG projects that have already been sanctioned to move forward or already under development, there is substantial LNG capacity that can be brought to market. Projects that have been developed but not yet seen final investment decision taken. And really, when you consider the role now of Qatar, of Russia, of the US, and other geographies, new geographies like Mozambique, there is effectively far more potential supply of LNG, even than that very robust growth in demand can ultimately bear. And we are effectively now getting to a point where we're sort of awash in available gas that can be developed into LNG, liquefaction capacity being developed and exports being brought to market going forward. So the real question on the supply side that many are grappling with now is which projects will ultimately be canceled outright versus final investment decision will be delayed going forward as a result of this. And you can see here just on this slide some of what is a very long list of potential projects, many of which are, in my home country in the US here, that are really being affected by this, given their role as independent projects where they need offtake commitments and they need debt financing to be able to proceed. So what does that mean for supply-demand balances here? I'll synthesize this with a couple slides here and a few observations about what this means for our outlook on gas globally. Number one, clearly we're in a significant oversupply situation in LNG at the moment. That's affecting gas markets around the world. And we're seeing LNG prices over the summer reached record lows. They've now rebounded a bit. The market has tightened as we've seen some LNG export facilities shut down or capacity be curtailed. In the US, it's really been in the form of cargo cancellations. Other projects like, or facilities like Gorgon have gone into maintenance cycles, some voluntary, some not. Regardless, a combination of that has helped to tighten the market. And I think we're now finally starting to see an upswing, a sustainable upswing in spot prices for LNG as we enter the fall into winter heating season in the Northern Hemisphere. Nonetheless, we're at price points far below normal, effectively, or what we would expect have seen in prior years. A second big theme that sort of come out of this environment and is one to watch going forward, really is the role of Europe helping to balance markets globally. And here, I think we're sort of seeing the consequences of an oversupply situation where we need Europe to play this supply sink role, but also the benefits of having much more flexible LNG market globally than we've had in the past. And the elimination of destination clauses from Japanese cargoes, combined with the greater role of the spot market and short-term sales in LNG, have really enabled, I think, a more flexible liquid market to ease this supply glut in the short term here. And that's, I think, a promising sign going forward that should bring confidence, I think, to many entering the market. But ultimately, I think a third impact that is quite significant going forward for the long term potentially is that the current situation has highlighted some of the risks to LNG producers. And those that have seen a significant supply or capacity curtailments, production curtailments, low capacity utilization factors, it really is challenging the economics and I think potentially changing some perceptions. Much of that has been in the US, and here it's been the off-takers from US export facilities that hold the tolling capacity that have been hit the hardest. So, we've seen certainly with some of our clients that we engage with on the buyer side, I think a different perception now of US LNG and capacity tolling arrangements in the US going forward. So that may then, I think affect buying behavior and the ability then of US projects to secure some of those commitments that they've seen in the past. So those are some of the impacts. I think it's a mixed bag overall so far. Some positive, obviously very challenging on the supply side. And going forward, I think that challenging supply environment is likely to continue. In our supply demand balances, we still see a potential for an oversupplied market by 2025, whereas we would have expected the supply surplus to close by 2022, 23, before COVID-19. It looks likely that that's pushed out to 25 here, simply because of the short-term hit, right? We resume fast growth rates going forward, but it will take a number of years to really catch up with that in a period when there's substantial new LNG capacity coming to market. And, when you start to overlay these views going forward here, we start to see the market rebalancing in 2025, but that's also the period where we see Qatar effectively likely to bring their new capacity to market, almost 50 MTPA of incremental capacity. So it raises, again, some significant questions on the supply side, looking out through the rest of the decade. Is Qatar going to effectively take much of that share of incremental demand, or really will there be opportunities for other suppliers, to enter the market and to gain share going forward? And then lastly, and I'll wrap up on this point here, this outlook raises some questions too about the price point at which LNG is likely to be sold going forward. We know here, this is our sort of pre-FID supply curve, where we look at the economics of different geographies. The bars are really ranges of the estimates here. We know that Qatar is effectively some of the lowest cost LNG globally, but also other geographies are able to bring LNG to market at a very low price point as well. And across Mozambique, in Russia, and the substantial capacity that's likely to be available from the U.S. Gulf of Mexico. So ultimately, that means, I think, a lower price point for LNG than we've expected in the past, or seen in the past. On the long run, reinvestment economics for this, it really is in the $4 to $8 per MMBTU range. But with, I think, very abundant supply, and I think a willingness of some particular parties here, Qatar and Russia, that operate more from an NOC mindset, bringing capacity to market to ensure they capture share, not necessarily purely on the basis of supply-demand dynamics, along with, I think, some other high potential projects coming in here, means that in an oversupply situation, we could that type of oversupply situation could be sustained, and we could see prices in the lower end of the range going forward. So to sum up here, again, COVID-19 having a very significant short-term impact. The long-term fundamentals, medium to long-term fundamentals for LNG are still very strong from the demand side. Rapid growth in Asia, many new markets entering, but the supply side is challenged. And there is the substantial capacity that can be brought to market is sort of far exceeds, I would say, even the rapid growth potential on the demand side. So I think going forward, that means likelihood of a sustained lower price environment. And also in the case of Indonesia here, as we're talking about today, I think for LNG exporters, those that are already exporting and particularly looking at new incremental projects, I think it raises some important questions about where is the greatest value from the gas that they can produce. Is it in export-oriented markets, as we've seen in the past, or potentially from driving a greater consumption and building up markets, domestic markets, that can not only sort of see the value from the direct economic value from the consumption, but also benefit from the adoption of gas in other ways, really around the broader economic development it can promote, and of course, the environmental benefits in the form of cleaner air and lower greenhouse gas emissions. So I'll pause there. I think that's really just meant to set the scene a little bit and anchor the rest of the discussion in a view of global market fundamentals. But happy to take questions or discussion on the content so far.
Okay, thanks, Alex, for a very comprehensive and interesting presentation. I have some takeaway from your presentation. The LNG will grow more than 10% per annum compared to the annual growth of gas, which is less than 1% since 2016. The second one is that despite of slightly lower LNG demand in 2020 due to COVID, except for the Asian market, the future LNG demand is still promising. This is good news for us. The LNG is expected in your grow between 2 to 4% annually, and we take note also that some critical demand enablers. This is important things for us, I think. For the established LNG importing countries are the economic growth, of course, the decommissioning coal and nuke, additional investment and downstream infrastructure, and on top of that, the development of new regas capacity and small scale LNG are essential to create the demand, especially for the niche and market. I believe this is the case for Indonesia as well. So with the growing demand and the freezing new LNG project, because of the low oil price and low LNG price, there is a ongoing financing issue for the infrastructure developers. There is also a capex reduction issue for the E&P players. So the supply-demand gap will likely to occur in the near future. This gap is supposed to be balanced with the new supply. And again, a new supply, of course, they need the enough price to be sanctioned, which according to BCG will be between $4 to $8 per MMBTU. I think this is also to address the question from one of the audience. What will be the range of the oil price? So the range of the oil price in the near future in BCG view is between $4 to $8 per MMBTU. That is the price that will enable a new supply to come on stream. So please correct me, Alex. But to start the first Q&A session, I have a question for you. So as you mentioned, the fuel switching from coal or nuke to the gas will be a fundamental drivers for the LNG and gas demands growth in the near future. In the current low LNG and oil price, which makes LNG and gas more affordable. But on the other hand, the technology of renewable is also is becoming cheaper now. So of course, those two options is at the end of the day is largely depending to the government policy. This is as you explained also. So in your opinion, what kind of government policy that can help the gas industry to take the benefit from this situation? So in the current low LNG price, we believe that the gas industry should take the benefit, but we need the support from the government in terms of the policy. So please share your opinion. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think there's a really wide range of policies that can be effective in promoting coal to gas switching or just the adoption of gas generally. One of the most effective sets of or categories of policies that we've seen in different markets so far is effectively governments valuing the clean air, local pollution benefits that gas provides in some form or another. In China, where we've seen the most rapid gas adoption in the last several years, that has taken a very direct path of policy implementation, given the command and control nature of the Chinese economy. With that, we've seen mandates on coal to gas switching. We've seen the rationalization of industrial capacity that is less efficient or unable to switch from coal to gas. And we've seen enforcement, of that very clearly at a direct local level. That's prompted significant switching, very rapid gas market growth. In other market contexts, that can take the form of economic incentives, of specific regulatory measures around local air pollution, PM 2.5, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, et cetera. But in some form or another, in some way, I think really internalizing those economic externalities that we talk about associated with air pollution is the most effective way to really generate that switching and to realize those benefits of gas. I think when you look at other sectors as well, it's important to understand that gas is not the incumbent fuel. Gas is a new challenging fuel, right, in many markets, particularly in Asia. So I think another category of policies that are also quite effective are ones that we're actually used to seeing maybe more in the renewable space or traditional, what's thought of as kind of clean tech deployment of new technologies. And those are incentives for early adoption. It's the provision of infrastructure as well to enable access to gas. As you would for expanding electrification, power access, or you would for, say, current discussions around EV adoption, taking the same types of measures to enable gas use in the transport sector, in buildings, in small-scale industry is, another very effective set of policies that can really drive gas adoption and innovation in that space as well. And then lastly, I'd say the third category that's really critical is policy that enables the development of large-scale infrastructure to be able to access gas. Fundamentally, the degree of access in most parts of non-OECD Asian countries in particular is very low. Really just a fraction of the population or economic activity can really access natural gas. So large-scale infrastructure for regas terminals, investing in transmission networks, all of that. And then that can take many forms, right? But that's an essential building block as well. So those are really three categories, I would say, based on where we've seen rapid gas demand growth in other markets.
Thank you, Alex. Of course, we will elaborate more. One of your answers, I think the other speaker is will be discussing more on that, I believe. I think there is also one question, I think, from the audience, from the demand side, what countries that have been ready to absorb the LNG as the primary energy? I mean,
yeah, so in recent years, much of the global growth has really been driven by China. I alluded to the coal to gas switching policies there. Chinese natural gas consumption growth has been averaging, over 15% per year, upwards of close to 20% in some years recently. So they've been in, a major phase of increasing the share of gas, and they've set very ambitious targets. The last 5-year plan, set a pathway to initially 5% of primary energy demand being supplied by natural gas, accelerating to 10% down the line. Whether or not they meet 10% is debatable, but they're on that pathway. India as well, after I think many years of stagnant market growth, their investment in the domestic transmission capacity and in developing city gas as a new source of demand is really now paying off, and you've started to see rapid growth there. Lastly, though, I'll say, Europe has played a really critical role in the last 18 months in particular, given their flexibility in their supply and their ability to absorb LNG and displace pipeline imports, as well as replace some of the domestic production that's been declining. And effectively, when the supply side growth has outpaced what I'd say new or growing markets in Asia have been able to absorb, Europe has played that flexible role in being kind of the demand sink and helping to balance markets globally. So I would be remiss if I didn't state the important role that Europe has been playing for LNG in the last few years.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. Ladies and gentlemen, Alex has shared his view on some fundamental drivers for the future gas development, including the switching of coal or nuclear to gas. This is an interesting part of the discussion. So to discuss further about the fuel switching in the region, including Indonesia, I will invite another reliable speaker, which probably some of us are already familiar with. She holds Bachelor Engineering from Sheffield University and Master in Science from University of Warwick and Master of International Economics and Finance from University of Queensland. Before joining Wood Mackenzie in 2019, she worked with ExxonMobil for 10 years in various positions across the value chain, including head of LNG market development. She is now the principal analyst for Asia Pacific Gas and LNG Research Team covering the regional market outlook based in Singapore. Ibu Asti, please welcome. The floor is yours. Ibu
Thank
Asti
you,
Nuraini.
Rahmat. Good morning, selamat pagi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for having me in the session. It's good to see some familiar names, if not faces, on the screen. Unfortunately, due to the COVID situation, whereas before I would travel quite frequently down to Jakarta to see some of you, that's been kind of out of the cards for this year. So hopefully through this session can help can bridge the ability to travel down and see you all in person. So just moving on to my presentation. Let me know if you can see my screen. Just put that in presentation mode. Can you see my screen?
Belum muncul, Bu.
Hello? Muncul ya?
Not yet, Bu.
Okay, let me try again. Can you see now?
Not yet. Still working, I think. Yes, I can see now.
Sudah muncul, Bu.
Sudah ya?
Ya, sudah.
Kalau sekarang?
Sudah.
Ya, okay.
Yeah, already, Bu. Very good.
Yeah. Thank you. So Alex took us through kind of the global view, and for my session here, we'll take a bit more regional breakdown, specifically the Asia Pacific region, and more specifically at the coal to gas switching that's been happening or not happening in this part of the world. So Alex mentioned this as well, and I think you all are probably familiar with that picture there of the Jakarta skyline covered in smog. It's not a Jakarta specific problem. A lot of the big Asian cities, whether it's Beijing, Delhi, are facing the same issue of smog and air pollution driven by a combination of factors, whether from transportation or from the industrial and power sector, as they burn more of the polluting fuel, primarily coal. So China has been a bit in the forefront in terms of combating this air quality issue through some very strict government policy. And if you can see here, this is a reading of their PM 2.5 for, I'm covering here Beijing and Korea. So you see these big spikes for Beijing in kind of the 2015 up to 2017 timeframe, and that has then dropped significantly on the back of their blue sky policy. So this gives significant support and proof to the role of gas in being able to meet the country's energy demand, as well as playing a cleaner energy role in that fuel mix by replacing coal in a lot of their fuel consumption. And I've put in there as well Korea, because we've seen that they're starting to follow Beijing's kind of experience in terms of managing the air pollution. So while the average there, the blue line that you see, Seoul is actually still much better than Beijing, but the blue banded area, the blue shaded area there is the high peaks and the lows on a daily basis. So if you can see going forward to kind of the 2019 timeline, starting from 2015 to 2019, those peaks are getting higher and they're getting more frequent. So they're aware that maybe on an average, it's not so much of an issue yet, but they're starting to see these spikes happening more frequently, and they're trying to stop that and mitigate that before it gets even worse. And so this is kind of like a backstory of where the air quality issue impacting these big cities. Fast forward to where we are now today with the combination of low LNG prices, low oil prices. We'll see how this impact the push for coal to gas switching in some of the countries. So from kind of the North Asia, I'll move over to India, just because this one is an interesting market in the sense that their power market and their fuel market is less regulated than what is common in the rest of Asia Pacific region. So because it's not regulated, you'd see India there starting the year. India historically has always relied a lot more on coal on their power generation. As you see there in the 20th of January earlier this year, gas into power is still quite challenged in the overall fuel mix, because they were still running on they are running on merits basis. So obviously it's very hard for gas to compete with coal on that basis. But you see going forward there, so the blue line on your left-hand chart, that shows an increase of gas to power demand, offset by that declining gray line, which is the coal part of the power fuel mix. So you see that even though the overall total power demand declines, given the COVID implications and the lockdowns that came at the back of it, even though total power demand decreases, gas's role has increased in meeting that power demand. And you see that trend continue to increase over the year as the gas demand driven, especially by that spot LNG. So if you look in the middle chart there, you see the growth in spot LNG on a year-to-year basis. So there's starting the year started quite slow, but it picks up as you see LNG prices dropping further and further throughout the year, with kind of COVID impact spreading more globally. And like I said, India, this is not a policy driven, this is very much economics driven. And because of the way the India gas market is structured, a lot of the IPP players can immediately access the spot LNG from the global market space and be able to compete with coal with the cheaper LNG prices. So if you see on the right-hand side there, we're looking at specifically at one province in India, and you see spot LNG there comfortably sits below the coal prices. So part of this is obviously the low LNG prices. So this was, we're looking at LNG DS in West India at $2.5, and you add in all the tariff, the regas and the pipeline tariff, that gets you to the top of the gray chart. For coal, in India, a lot of the coals are imported on the eastern part of the country, whereas a lot of your power demand is on the western part. So coal is unfortunately being hit by quite a bit of high transportation costs to bring it from the eastern part of the country to the western part. Whereas for LNG, it is in the west that all of India's regas facilities are located there. So they're competing both on just overall lower fuel cost itself and a more efficient transport system as well. And so you see that spot LNG competes comfortably with coal, and that feeds into the the coal to gas switching that we see in India. The question then becomes that since this is not a policy-driven one, this will obviously it's very sensitive to the movement of the spot LNG. So the questions are on how sustainable is this growth in gas to power demand. because once we see spot LNG price rise, then you would start, the two gray bars between spot LNG and coal, we start matching each other, and maybe even once spot LNG becomes more expensive than coal, then you see kind of gas to coal switching happening again, unless there's some further government policy put in place to maintain this demand for gas in the power sector. So we've seen what market forces can do in the near term, given where prices are now today. But what about markets that can't access that low spot prices? So we come back here to Korea, where you see the top green line there is their weighted average cost of gas. So Korea operates imports obviously. So Korea gas prices is the weighted average of its dominated by its long-term LNG contracts, which tends to be priced at the high 13.5, 14.5% indexation to JCC. So that's the price that they pass on to the downstream customers, whether it be industry or power. And since they hold these big LNG importers, for example, KOGAS, obviously, they hold control over a lot of the volumes. The downstream players who don't have access to the market, don't have access to the regas facilities, then they just have to take on that wake-up price, and they're not seeing the cheaper spot prices that you see there on the red line. And if we're comparing the blue bands there that you see, that looks at the switching bands based on comparing, if you start at the top of the band, that compares that's the most effective gas plant versus the least efficient coal plant. So if your price curve dips into that blue band, that's when, from an economics point of view, it will make sense for these power plants to switch from coal to gas. So if you see the green line just kind of touches slowly with the drop in oil prices, but once that oil prices start to recover, it quickly moves that LNG price way above that switching band. So that's why we haven't quite yet seen a significant coal to gas switching in Korea, despite the low LNG prices the low spot LNG prices in the red lines you see there, because that's not what the market is seeing. The market is seeing the green line. We do have instances where there are IPPs that do have access to some regas terminals. We have seen some of them importing spot LNG, and that makes them more competitive in the power landscape within Korea. But for the vast majority, they're still seeing that green line, and with the lack of economic incentive, like we saw in India's case, the switching is quite limited in Korea. And we think if they don't do anything, there's only a short window of that switching to happen before oil prices will start to recover, unless they allow some more exposure to spot prices, because spot prices are staying with that switching band for a lot longer period of time. And so instead of relying on the economics, then the Korea government is pushing this more on the policy side. So we've seen this is their currently 8th basic plan. Previously, they announced obviously more focus on gas and renewables, and a downward push for coal and nuclear. A slightly increase in gas, but definitely a huge increase in renewables role there, as we see the economics for these renewables become more attractive for markets such as Korea. And then they have recently come up with a draft 9th basic plan. So it's not apple to apple yet, because if you see the 8th basic plan was looking at generation mix, whereas the 9th basic plan was looking at capacity mix. So that's why they're not quite apple to apple here. But I just want to point out that you see nuclear and coal are getting squeezed very strongly over that forecast, over that plan period, going from 46% of capacity to just 25% in the next kind of 14 years. And gas as a percentage stays about the same, and you see renewables playing a much bigger role in their overall fuel mix. So this is a way of making of the country trying to meet its energy needs as well as meeting its environmental target. So they're moving away from the cheaper sources of both coal and nuclear, and paying more of the premium in the gas and the gas side to complement the renewables mix. What does it mean for, what is the case for Indonesia then? So obviously Indonesia is very reliant on coal in its power mix. It makes sense. There's a lot of domestic coal that can procure cheaply. And at this point in time for the country, the pushing down the cost of generation is the key priority in the power generation sector. So if anything, if you see there on the left chart is Woodmac's forecast of the power fuel mix for Indonesia, and actually coal will pick up in the next decade before then starts to declining in the next starting the 2030s, and that eats into the role of gas in the fuel mix before then start to grow in the longer term. But even by the end of the 2040, we still see coal taking just over half of the overall power fuel mix, and gas as well, and gas at 30%. So it's still very reliant on fossil fuel, and you see the renewable side is probably not as strong as kind of you would see in other countries in the region, just because the way the country structures obviously are islands, and a lot of the renewables resources, whether it be wind or solar, are located a bit further away from your key demand centers of West Java and Sumatra. So those two key areas will still rely heavily on fossil fuel over the long term. And in terms of gas availability, obviously Indonesia has quite a large gas reserve, but again, they're located away from the key demand centers. So a lot of that volume will need to be converted to LNG first before it can then be used in West Java or the Sumatra region. And one of the challenges then for Indonesia is in terms of its regas, access to its regas capacity. So apart from the Java 1 project, there hasn't been any proposed large-scale regas facility to be built in Indonesia. So we've heard a lot of small scale being built in the outer islands, but nothing on the large scale that will be required to meet that growth in the LNG demand that we forecast starting in the 2030s. And if Indonesia does start to push more on the coal to gas switching, you would see that demand will actually, that demand bars in the 2020s could go higher, and will pose some, and then the regas infrastructure then will pose some of the bottlenecks to accessing that growth in overall gas and LNG demand. Okay, so I guess what are the takeaways? We've looked at how India has done it, which is more of just market-driven economics, allowing players to quickly access the spot markets. But there's questions around how sustainable is that approach. And then we see the other end of the spectrum with Korea going down the policy path to push gas more into their energy mix. On the Indonesia side, obviously in the near term, given the impact of the coronavirus to the country's economy, it'll be a bit hard to push through some of the more expensive LNG into to the domestic market. But But also there's, in the long term, there's bigger questions around the market structure and the policy and the decision making. So for example, with obviously Indonesia relies more on the domestic LNG contracts. And so there's not really a clear access to the cheaper spot market. So is there questions around ability to reflect some of that cheap spot LNG prices in the overall LNG contract portfolio, whether it be PLN's LNG portfolio or Pertamina, PGN's LNG portfolio, and how are they then able to pass that on to the end customer? Similarly, the third-party access to infrastructure will help demand discovery and better transparency in the price itself. And then the kind of the bigger question is around is there a free market competition then between pipeline price, domestic LNG, and imported LNG to compete in the domestic market? Obviously that ties in then, if we're not looking at the pure economics, then that ties into the decision making or the policy side in order to make gas more attractive, if not pure on a price basis, but through carbon tax or just a top-down mandate in terms of where the fuel mix should be. I think that's what I have.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to Bu Asti for the insightful presentation. I made some notes from Bu Asti presentation, which basically complement Alex's presentation. The first one is the environmental concern has driven the rapid growing of the LNG demand, particularly in China, for instance. And we also see that India has switched from coal to gas in their power generation amid the low LNG spot price. But as you explain also, the sustainability of the switchings might be impacted by the increasing of the LNG price in the coming years. And for the Japan and South Korea, the gas price below 5.5 should make it competitive compared to coal, which means the current LNG spot price is cheaper than coal. That's my conclusion. South Korea is also planning aggressively to use the gas and renewable, more than 66% against coal and nuclear in 2030 in their power generation mix. And lastly, Indonesia is largely depending on coal in their power generation, but the gas is required to cope an increasing demand in power sector. The gas resources in Indonesia is available, but there is a need for infrastructure to connect the demand and supply center. To open the Q&A session, I have one question, Bu Asti, to you. In the current low LNG price, the spot price, which is currently is very low, between $2 to $4, do you think that the PLN will be able to switch from coal to gas or LNG in their power generation mix?
So I think where obviously there's the low LNG prices, the low spot LNG prices are very attractive at the moment. But we also need to take an account of, for PLN, that they have existing long-term LNG contracts. So then it becomes of, are they then going to drop their long-term LNG contracts and then procure LNG spot to replace those higher priced LNG contracts? So there's a lot of commercial sensitivity around the ability to do that. Because ideally you would consume your LNG contracts first before then procuring the cheaper spot LNG, unless you can do some negotiations with your suppliers to maybe defer some of the cargoes. But as you mentioned, it's a difficult time for both seller and buyers, right? So there's that element of just how able are they to unbundle the existing LNG commitments that they already have on the back of overall lower power demand. And then if they add on top of that purchasing LNG spot cargoes, you see these three kind of pieces of the puzzle that they need to work through. So it's not unfortunately it's not as simple as just going out there and procuring it, but they do have commercial obligations and commitments in place to consider, especially since these are domestic cargoes as well. I'm sure the government, SKK Migas, will look closely into that mix between committed LNG, contracted LNG versus importing LNG from or buying it at the spot market.
Thank you, Bu Asti. I think this is a good input for all of us, particularly PLN, to start their primary energy mix. I mean, it's not only the long-term contracts, but perhaps to access also the spot price. That's what you are saying, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, perhaps the way that be cheaper, and in some cases like Cotex, they can take the benefit from the low energy price. I have one question in the chat of the Zoom, but I will keep it, Pak Taufik, at the end of the session. After discussing, thank you, Bu Asti. I think we will move on.
Thank you.
It's very interesting discussion about the future gas demand. Excuse me, from power sectors, explained by Bu Asti. Now, I mean, we would like also to see in the other gas value chain the opportunity of the gas demand in the future. I mean, of course, power is the biggest one. We already discussed a bit that this is a good timing for us to consider the switching from coal to the gas. But also we would like to see what are the other sectors that we can optimize to promote the utilization of gas, particularly in Indonesia. So I have another faithful speaker. He holds a chemical engineering PhD from University of Pennsylvania, an engineering degree from University of Minnesota. He started his career at the Brookhaven National Laboratory, U.S. Department of Energy. He is leading the catalytic research for ethanol reforming process at the time. He joined Boston Consulting Group in 2013. He is now a principal at the Boston Consulting Group, and he is a lead member of the Energy and People and Organization practice globally. He has over 10 years experiences in the energy industry in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Australia, and North America. I would like to invite, please welcome Pak Edi Martonocin. Please, Pak Edi, the time is yours.
I think thank you, terima kasih Pak Rahmat. I think good morning, selamat pagi Bapak Ibu dari Indonesia Gas Society, as well as Bapak Ibu. I see that there are some from Pupuk, from Pertamina, from Kadin. So very grateful for this opportunity. I think for me today, I would work upon the great things that has been shared earlier from Pak Alex, as well as Ibu Asti. Give me a second. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, it's very good, Pak.
Okay. Yeah. I think some of the things that I will share here basically resonates very well with what was discussed as well as presented earlier. Right? When we look at the future of the gas itself, despite there is a minor correction because of COVID, remains quite promising. We are talking about the growth of, let's say, between 1.5 to 2%. Up to 2035, and most of this growth is projected to come from the developing countries in Asia. When we talk about gas, I think many of the discussion earlier talk about how is the cost parity relative to coal, etc. The way I think another perspective to look into it is what are the additional benefits and what are the alternative one could have on a specific situation. So in this case, I think I try to summarize in terms of the expected benefits from gas. I think number one is across many countries, across many regions, it has been proven to result in an immediate reduction in the greenhouse gas emission as well, essentially creating a better air for humanity. Second as well is due to its nature and the ability to be distributed in a more scalable fashion. Hence, it's actually enable more distributed energy system, as well as at the same time increase the efficiency of the energy consumption. Last but not least, I think when we look at gas itself compared to other form of the fossil fuel, the like of fuel oil, etc., it's really the cleanest fossil fuel, right, that we have today. Hence, in many parts of the country and in Asia as well as globally, it is used to support as well the energy transition agenda. We talk about, let's say, the clean air, how it helps in reducing the greenhouse gas emission. So what is shown here is there is a strong correlation between the consumption of gas as part of the energy consumption with the resulting basically urban PM 2.5 is the air pollutants concentration. What we see here is as country or region increase the share of gas consumption, it actually resulted in a decline in the urban PM 2.5 concentration itself. I think on top of that, I think when we talk about the scalability, the ability to bring the clean cooking fuel access to energy to a different part of the world or a country that previously do not necessarily have the access, we see that gas can actually play a significant part on that as well. When we look at part of Asia, part of Africa, where today people rely mostly on the open flame fuel or cooking, in the future, I think with the growth of gas, we could potentially foresee this switch of the usage from the relatively more dirty fuel to a clean cooking fuel through the use of gas. The delivering against the ambition, the 1.52% growth of gas globally does not come easy. I think it has been mentioned a couple of times as well by Ibu Asti and Pak Alex, right? We look into the challenge, which should be very familiar to Bapak Ibu's in this group, right? Around the three things. The first is we talk about the cost competitiveness. How do we actually rationalize the fact that, let's say, gas power plant tend to be more expensive relative to coal, especially in the region in the country where we have a lot of coal abundant resource. Second is we talk about the security of supply. In here, number one is basically the availability of the gas itself, but I think second, more importantly, is actually the infrastructure connecting the supply and the demand side itself. Last but not least, I think on the sustainability front, this is more in the region like Europe and North America. At the end of the day, I think despite gas producing about, let's say, 30 to 40% greenhouse gas emission relative to the like of coal, it still does, let's say, produce greenhouse gas, and hence for select country to meet their ambitious target, it actually requires them to push towards the, let's say, a low carbon application combined with the renewable front. When we look at region like Asia specifically, no surprises. The critical challenge that we are facing is on two fronts. The first is the cost competitiveness itself, as well as second is the supply infrastructure. How do we connect the supply and the demand, especially looking into the past 10, 20 years, whereby the investment in the infrastructure itself has been relatively lacking versus, let's say, more developed country. Hence, I think in here we try to summarize in terms of what are some of the potential enablers that one could consider in order to deliver against the full gas potential. I think the first one is the government policy. In here we talk about, I think many countries start implementing carbon pricing. I think there are countries like China who go as far as shutting down coal power plant, doing a moratorium in a select region. So those are an example of the government policy. Still relatively slow, but I guess in this perspective, it's intentionally, right? In a way that one need to be very careful when they make changes in the policy, because it impact other industry at the same time. Second is the infrastructure investment, connecting the supply and demand. One of the discussion around, for example, in India, there is a thought around bringing gas pipeline to cities, right? We talk about how we could potentially create a domestic market itself. The creation of the domestic market itself would require a significant infrastructure investment. Last but not least, in here we talk about the industry innovation. While I think in the past years, we tend to see things are moving relatively slower on the policy front, on the infrastructure front, maybe except China to a certain extent. But on the industry innovation front, actually, there has been a lot of study, research, even those that have gone through the implementation in terms of how we bring the cost down, how do we bring in new technology like small scale LNG, FSRU, as well as, let's say, in terms of the commercial model itself to make it more acceptable relative to the alternative option in the market. Going on the policy front, I think shown on the left side here is some of the example of the policies that one could consider to help boost or shape the future gas market development. Many of these levers are basically span across the value chain itself, from production, trade, infrastructure to the consumption itself. What's interesting are the things that are on the right side, right? In here, we are making a comparison for the two countries, China and India, where about 20 years ago, the consumption of gas is very similar. But if we look at where we are today, it's about 4 to 5x, right, between China and India. Obviously, if the question is this the result of just a policy? I think the honest answer is probably is a combination of policy as well as heavy or committed investment on the infrastructure front. And on the policy front itself, yes, there are things that are listed here. But at the same time, when we look into the levers policy that are implemented in China, some of them could be applicable elsewhere. Some of them may be seen as, let's say, too much top-down, right? Command and control, where it may not necessarily work in the country like Indonesia. On the industry innovation front, I think this is the example of some of the things that has been able to be delivered through, let's say, research, technology, the hard work of people in the gas society. Right? And here we are talking about 20% efficiency in the gas consumption. On the capex front, we see 10% efficiency plus. Distributed small-scale LNG, we see that through the implementation of this, it brings the upfront capex reduction by almost 50% plus. One may argue that the cost would still be high despite this 50% plus reduction, but from our perspective, it's still quite a huge achievement, right, to date. As well as in the operation of the plant itself, operational excellence, where the ramp-up time of the combined cycle gas turbine generation, we can generate about 40% improvement. I think this is example because I think if I look at the past years, there has been a lot of spotlight in Indonesia, in regional as well as globally in terms of how things evolve, the advancement that are made in the renewable, the like of solar, wind, EV battery. Now Indonesia has a very strong agenda on the battery and electric vehicle. Less so attention were put by the, let's say, media on the work that has been done on the gas front. Despite so, I think just want to highlight there has been a lot of work done as well on the gas front. In here, I will share couple example of the let's say industry advancement. Some of them has been tried out and implemented in Indonesia. success, with limited success, depending on the context itself. In here, the first one talk about FSRU, whereby I think if we were to compare FSRU and the conventional regas facility, then it is more cost efficient, and it also require lower capital gas upfront on the investment of the FSRU. Hence, I think when we look at the result itself within the span of 3 years from 13 to 16, it actually grow almost by 90%. There's a question in terms of the scalability as well as how would it work in the region where the demand is not necessarily high. Hence, from the cost perspective, it may not work out. I think it's something that warrant further study and investigation on how we could potentially combine the concept of FSRU with other stuff to make it work for a specific region, for a specific country. Another example I want to highlight is around the small scale LNG. In here is the example that we had from China, whereby I think in the past, mostly it was delivered through the pipeline. And as Bapak Ibu would know, I think in terms of the transmission itself, I think in China is fully controlled or managed by the NOC in China. Hence, I think what was shown here, I think there was a lot of investment on in order to catch up with the demand itself through the use of the LNG truck. And in here we see that the truck LNG costs actually were, let's say, sizable lower compared to the average city gate price. One of the main driver of this difference could be the price of which it was purchased, of which I think through the truck LNG one could access it from any seller right at the port. Last example of industry innovation that I would like to share is related to the extending gas infrastructure to cities. I think there has been a lot of discussion, as well as I think it will continue in the future, about how do we actually create new market domestically in different countries, including Indonesia. When we look at gas and how the characteristic itself, right, in terms of the nearly very good from the air pollution side, greenhouse gas much better than the like of coal and oil, excellent heat intensity, as well as some degree of the scalability. So from this perspective, not purely taking into account the dollar per dollar basis, but if one could potentially quantify how much does one value a better air quality for people in Jakarta, for example, then it become an interesting discussion. So one of the example that we show here is in India, where they are not talking about building the infrastructure for the countrywide, which I don't think it makes sense. They leverage the region where there is already a domestic natural gas industry that originally was used to supply a different industrial estate. And what they do, I think beyond that is, I think 5 years down the road, they establish a consortium where they connect the pipeline to homes in Mumbai. I think followed by also putting in policy in terms of to ensure that the cost is competitive for the customer itself. I think if we look at where we are today, I think yes, still relatively low compared to the developed countries, but I think this is one example where people were able to build upon the existing existing source of gas that were intended for industry to the neighboring cities and region. We talked a lot about the example in terms of the policy, in terms of the need for infrastructure investment, as well as the industry innovation itself. Just want to share a bit of thoughts on what would it mean, right, for Indonesia specifically. I think if we look at Indonesia itself, in terms of the greenhouse gas emission, we alone contribute about 37% of the total emissions generated in Southeast Asia region. The number would be significantly higher when we include the LULUCF, is basically the change in the land usage. But if we exclude that, the number is still quite prevalent compared to our neighboring countries. When we look at gas presents one of the potential solution to help meet our greenhouse gas emission reduction. We have an abundant resource. Yes, our fields are declining. There is a significant work required to sustain and boost the production itself of gas. Yet, I think if we look at the difference between the supply and the demand front, I think we expect the delta to continue to go up or to widen, right, by 16% until 2030. I think so far, I think we have been very much reliant on the export market with the decline of the price, as well as I think mentioned previously by Ibu Asti and Alex. Then it actually warrants a question around what are some of the alternatives from the domestic market that one could explore to make sure that we can use it for full value potential in Indonesia. I think in here I will leave it with some of the thoughts more for discussion in terms of what are some of the initiatives that one could consider to catalyze the growth in Indonesia. Number one is from the government policy front. Is there anything around, let's say, pollution regulation, incentive for natural gas usage? We are not talking about countrywide policy, but specific regions. Like when we look at China, they are more focusing on the, let's say, the big cities, right, where near the shore itself, like Beijing, etc. So perhaps there is worth some discussion or further study on what could be done in a city like Jakarta, Surabaya, etc. Third is around when we look at the amount of power plant that we have today in Indonesia, most of them is coal mine. We expect this to stay 50-60% to be still in coal-fired power generation in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years. Then if we are talking about some switching, then one would need to think about the employees that are involved in the coal mining as well as the coal-fired power generation. Infrastructure side, I think here is looking into where I think we talk a bit about the supply and the demand and how we could potentially leverage to actually extend the infrastructure to promote gas pipeline for the neighboring cities. Small scale LNG supply chain is another things that already being discussed, I think, in the past years. I think it's more the question on the cost and what are some of the extension alternative that one could explore. From the industry innovation side, we have a lot of upstream field. I think when we talk about upstream, there is also opportunities where we can bring down the cost of the production through the like of digital operational excellence. When we go down to the, let's say, the downstream front, then similarly, I think some of the advancement of the latest technology, etc., could be used to drive the cost further down from, I think now we are talking about close to on the upstream front is almost $1.90 per SCF. Last one is around how one could potentially think about the business model. FSRU has been implemented in Indonesia, very quite expensive. In here is perhaps combination with more like, let's say, a distributed value chain model could be something that worth studying further. I think that's all from my side, and happy to engage in the discussion.
Pak Rahmat, I think you're on mute.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, can hear you now.
Sorry, technical problem. Thanks to Paidi for a very comprehensive presentation. Some takeaway from Paidi presentation. The first one is gas will play an important role in the reduction of greenhouse gas emission and air pollution and the cleanest fossil fuel as the energy transition. There is a strong evidence in many countries that there is a strong correlation between the gas shares and in energy consumption versus the average air pollutant in the most of the countries. Also, there is a big opportunity for gas to fill the needs of the clean cooking fuels. Now we already moved from kerosene to LPG. Perhaps in the future we need to move to natural gas. The next one is to promote the utilization of gas. There are three key enablers. This is a good point for all of us, I think. The first is the government policy. Whether is it possible or not, for instance, is the carbon pricing, infrastructure investment, and also the industry innovation. So you already explained about the new business model in FSRU and small scale LNG. I think we can learn from the Chinese government policy. The way they are incentivize the CNG and LNG for transport, which has successfully quadrupled the demand for the gas. And we also need new technology to improve the efficiency, such as in the gas combustion, and then the capex for the gas distribution and in some of LNG plant. New business model in the lease, gas terminal, truck distribution, as you explained, also can be an opportunity to promote the utilization of gas in Indonesia. So I will start the Q&A to Paidi with the question that what is, you already explained many opportunity available in front of us to promote the utilization of gas in Indonesia. So in your opinion, what is the low-hanging fruit for the development of gas in Indonesia? I had a question in the chat also about the LNG or CNG as the fuel for transportation, for the vehicle, for the truck, for the ship, for the ferry, or another sector like cooking fuel, which there is still a big opportunity ahead, or something else. I think that's to open the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Rahmat. I think when I think about gas in terms of the opportunities in Indonesia and what are the immediate things that one need to pay attention upon, I think it's three things. I think number one is, I think, yes, we have an abundant reserve, but at the same time, I think need to acknowledge that the reserve itself is declining, and we have many actually that are currently pending the development phase, right? Like asset of Masela by Inpex. There is the Repsol Sawamekang, like how do we actually develop them and produce them at the relatively cost competitive, especially acknowledging the current situation. I think that's one. Second is, I think leveraging some of the new ways of working, the like of digital, the likes of advancement of technology will definitely help on that front. I think the last one that I would share is more around how do we actually think about, let's say, a region specifics, like looking into where there are opportunities. You mentioned about cooking oil, as well as other means. How do we actually build a policy, region-specific policies with a specific intent and connect that, let's say, with the infrastructure to make it something that is plausible for the region? Because once you have one example, one success story, then that is something that could potentially be replicated. We know that Indonesia is wide from Sabang to Merauke. There is no silver bullet that will work for every single region, and hence the solution need to be tailored depending on which market that we want to tackle upon. There was a question around the LNG CNG car, and in here Alex Dewar and Ibu Asti could potentially chip in as well. I think when we look at the cost, I think it was a big success in China, but at the same time we need to acknowledge the investment that one put in China, right, in terms of to build the scale such that they were able to produce the vehicles in let's say much cheaper cost than any other place in the world. But definitely it could be interesting to explore.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Edi. I think basically what you are explaining is all of the sectors, depending on the situation and depending on the location, I think we can explore more gas usage in Indonesia. Alex or Bu Asti, do you want to add something on this question? Which low-hanging fruit do you think would be better or would be faster for the greater utilization of natural gas in want something? Hello.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. You were cutting up a little bit there. Can you hear me okay? Is my connection okay?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities here, right? And it's not a lesson we've learned in other markets is there's no one way to do this, right? I think the common denominator is finding commercial opportunities that may be small initially but can be scaled up over time, and really combining that with, I think, sufficient scale at the outset to provide the right incentive structure, to provide the right economic case for initial gas infrastructure investment that can be built on going forward. That's really the lesson from other markets. That's what we've seen in the past. I think what we could see going forward, though, is with small scale LNG based value chains, a very different type of model. And this is starting to emerge in other regions. In the Caribbean, for example, where you have island, another situation where you have island states there. And you can kind of leapfrog or have a different model of developing potentially gas infrastructure than that kind of large scale initial investment and then kind of building out incrementally from there. And I think that's quite exciting in the Indonesian context where, there still is opportunity to replace fuel oil or crude that's being used in power generation. There's off-grid industrial consumption, right? That's coal fired. And so that's where, the small scale type of value chain model, as it's tested and demonstrated in other parts of the world, I think is quite exciting and, really could open a very wide range of opportunities for gas use and adoption in Indonesia that, you might not necessarily look at today and say that's a clear, winning opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Bu Asti, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think for Indonesia, obviously small scale has been kind of in the cards for years now, whether it be in the power sector, with PLN going through different configurations of how they want to build the different hubs and clusters. So and I think that part is it's been on the works for years, as I mentioned. So there's probably a bit more hurdle in that side. But what we've seen is more on the industrial side in some of the use of ISO tanks trucks in Sumatra or in Jakarta area and Bali as well. And I think that's a good way to kind of test the market. And you don't rely on kind of the big vessels that you tie with the existing with your conventional infrastructure, but you can use your the trucks and the user roads that's already built to kind of start building up that small scale demand from the ground up from your existing industrial. So the push is then on someone on the demand aggregator side to combine all these smaller demands and make them into a volume that's substantial enough for them to obviously we know what the gas process is in Indonesia, is to go out to the upstream side and get some sort of gas allocation. I think that value chain then could start becoming more could then become kind of the first entry and try to open up a lot more gas demand within Indonesia.
Thank you, Bu Asti. Yeah, I think there is no single answers basically, and all of the things from three key enablers that Eddie mentioned about the government policy, infrastructure, and the innovation needs to be taken. I will start the Q&A for the all of the speakers with the very hot topic here. I think as you can see in the chat room, everyone is talking about the PLN, about the switching of coal to gas. So I think this is the situation. The demand from the power sectors in Indonesia is ultimately driven by PLN in their strategy of future energy mix. So this additional demand is supposed to attract the development of LNG infrastructures. So that's the first things to see. Or another thing is the gas infrastructure is there, or LNG infrastructure is there, and then PLN to build the new gas-fired or LNG-fired power plant. The question is, if we look at the long-term plan of power generation in PLN, we call it the RUPTL. We also do not see there is any significant new gas-fired power plant after Java 1. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation, I think. So I'm inviting all of you to share your view about this situation. So basically, what will be the best way? I mean, the best way in terms of forecasting, in terms of planning. I mean, which one is first? Is planning the big gas or LNG fired power plant with the long-term LNG or gas contract at what price, and then after planning the infrastructure, or on the other hand, planning the infrastructure and building a new gas-fired power plant. I think we can start with that question. Please, who will start? Bu Asti, perhaps.
Okay. So your question around whether we build the demand first or the infrastructure first. It's mentioned the chicken and egg. What we've seen happen in a lot of the Southeast Asia countries is this move towards the integrated LNG to power projects, right? So you will build a new power plant, and that's designated as a gas power plant, and you would build the associated infrastructure with it. We've seen that that's the approach that a lot of the governments, a lot of the industry players are looking into as a way to unlock that gas demand. So obviously, because if you separate the value chain, there's a lot of risks in there, right? Whether in terms of construction timing, in terms of financing, but in being able to package it as an integrated project, you remove some of that kind of timing issue and alignment issue. So we've seen that type of model being used a lot in the region, whether it be in Vietnam or Myanmar, and obviously Indonesia is actually leading this with the Java 1 project, right? So that's kind of the first large scale LNG to power project within the region. Myanmar started this year. So it's a nice surprise to see Myanmar actually started importing LNG on the back of an LNG to power project as well. But they're using a small scale LNG methodology. I think it's to use supply about 400 megawatts worth of power versus the more conventional big size for Java 1. So I think that's one way to avoid the chicken and egg. You just put them all together and make sure they're consistent and aligned in terms of timing, capacity, and more importantly on the economics as well, right? But that would require then someone taking the role of aligning all the different pieces, right? So you would have the LNG supply, you would have the infrastructure construction company, you would have the power plant operator. So it would require someone to align all those pieces together. So whether that be the government, the regulator, or if there's a strong interest from some of the big companies, you see, for example, ExxonMobil trying to build an LNG to power project in Vietnam. Some of those big names then can help bring all the parties together and make sure they keep to the same plan.
Before moving to the next speakers, how much is the average cost to switch from coal to gas, Bu Asti? Or probably put it on the other angle. How much is the weighted average cost of coal, sorry, so that gas can compete? I think,
so the cost will depend on the fuel cost.
The idea.
Yeah, so the switching cost is the difference in the fuel cost, right? So for example, you saw between what the coal cost is, what the LNG cost is, as well as the efficiency of your coal and gas plant. So if you recall my slide with the Korea case, there were switching bands depending on the efficiency of your gas and coal plant. So obviously at the higher band, your most efficient gas plant, you're comparing that against your least efficient coal plant. That's when that switching can occur within that band. So there's a different set of that combination of price and efficiency in terms of when you can do that. Unfortunately, I mean, a lot of these analysis we rely on like data that's available, and we take a run on it. But in terms of building up kind of PLN's coal plant efficiency and gas plant efficiency, that's probably where you look at that will build kind of similar band that you saw with Korea.
Okay, so basically, I know there is no instant answer, but I think the levels will be more or less quite similar with the other country, Pak.
Yeah,
Pak
so
Salis.
for Pak Salis, for Korea, we were looking at around $5.5 per MMBTU is kind of the switching price for the Korea scenario. So that takes into account the historical operational efficiency of the different Korea power plants. So you might have, a gas plant that's 35% efficient versus a coal plant that's 55% efficient, but you need to take, that's kind of the nameplate efficiency, right? But then you need to take into account as well on an actual operational basis, what is that efficiency? So that's why in the Korea slide, we don't take the switching price, the one on top, because we don't see, that's not where historically they've been operating at for the efficiency. It's actually further down the band for the switching, if you take into account the actual operational efficiency in their coal and gas power plants.
Okay, thank you. Now move to the, I don't know, Pak Alek or Pak Edi, who will start first about my previous question on the, the forecasting, the planning of the power generation, a new gas-fired power plant versus the infrastructure. I mean, what is the best way to do?
Yeah, I think just to build on what Ibu Asti is saying, I mean, absolutely spot on that, the way, and fully agree, right? The way to do these is these types of projects is both on an integrated basis. That's where we've seen success, and that's also effectively the gateway to unlocking additional gas demand. Once you have an anchor customer, in most markets, that's power generation. In other markets, it might be petrochemicals or other large industrial consumers. Then the incremental cost of enabling gas access for others is much less. And you start to unlock new networks of gas demand emerging. And it sort of paves the way for it. But you need those integrated projects in some form or another, right, on the front end to start doing that. One quick comment actually on this coal to gas switching. I think the other lens through which to look at it is really valuing that switching on a carbon price basis, because that increasingly in a world of greater climate action is a currency that is understood and valued globally, right? Where's the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions globally on a competitive basis, and how you value that on a dollar per ton basis there? Because just looking at that power price differential or the cost of fuel differential on a level and then power price on a levelized basis, it can seem somewhat large, insurmountable at times, but when you start to put it on a value of dollar per ton of carbon dioxide emissions, it's not necessarily that significant. We see ranges in Asia really from $20 per ton to $40 or $50 per ton, and what all the economic analysis sort of tells us is really the social cost of carbon. So effectively, how CO2 should be valued at this stage, given the impacts of climate change on all communities in the world, and frankly, some of the disproportionate impacts that will be born in tropical climates, impacts of climate change, right? That we should be looking really at a value already today of CO2, well above $35, $40 per ton of CO2, right? So in that case, there's sort of a clear climate action benefit. Nonetheless, I think it's really hard to make the case for coal to gas switching in any country that in any context that is producing coal and where jobs and livelihoods really depend upon coal production and coal value chains. It's hard to make that case without a clear, compelling set of policies that enable a just transition and enable effectively those communities to be able to prosper regardless. I mean, we see that in the U.S., we see it in Europe, we see it in Southeast Asia. Wherever there's coal, right, there are people that depend upon that industry for their fundamental livelihoods. And, that's the real, I think, critical challenge here of moving from coal, which is a very labor-intensive and established industry, to gas, which is a more infrastructure-dependent, less labor-intensive fuel source and is a new energy source. So, I think we can talk about all sorts of planning parameters and economic analysis on it. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to have a very, frank and honest political discussion about a just transition and, what can be done to ensure that it's really a win-win opportunity and communities that rely on coal are uplifted in the process.
Thank you, Alex. I think it's a very good input. Perhaps the carbon tax pricing, if the government can consider, will expedite the promotion of utilization of gas, particularly in the power sectors. Pak Edi, now it's your turn.
Yeah, I think fully aligned around looking at it at the integrated front. I think Alex talked about the policy, and I think looking at it the cost by cost basis, leveling cost of electricity between the two would be quite difficult to make a case for it. I think we are also not only talking about the gas price itself, but also the infrastructure. But I think I would just want to add one element around it is when we de-average the view, then one could potentially look into the area where gas could be one of the most viable option for the region, right? In a way, like when we talk about the area where there's already a coal-fired power plant, then the access to it is actually very cheap. But then as soon as one start thinking around the shipping, the distribution of it, then perhaps with the small scale like of LNG, as well as combine that with, let's say, a small ships where you can distribute it across different region, one could make a case from for the cost perspective. But to answer the question whether which one should go first, probably is more a question around integrated, and it is dependent on the policy as well as how far government want to push on the greenhouse gas as well as adoption of gas to the domestic market itself.
Perfect. Thank you, Pak Edi. I think if I may take a short conclusion, I think from this discussion about the promoting the utilization of gas or LNG in power sectors, I think there is need a strong plan. We need another Java one, I think, integrated with the LNG infrastructure, who is expected to I would say to pull the development of the infrastructure, and at the end, as the backbone buyers, it may also develop another sectors surrounding that. To have the one, and as if of Ibu asked, which I think is similar with the PLN, that a huge for the gas-fired power plant in the future. So I think why don't we accelerate?
Halo Pak Rahmat, I think we
Hello, sorry, I lost the connection. So hello.
yeah can hear you now.
Yes,
You
Pak.
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost the connection. So yeah, basically we need another Java one project, and if we can expedite the project, big project, and then to develop the other sectors in the complementary to this gas-fired power plant, so that we can also to develop the other opportunity, like for instance the transportation, the cooking fuel, or something else. We also have a question. I think this is from our stakeholders from SKK Migas. The question is the gas price of $6. Is it still attracting the investor to invest in Indonesia, or if you can share your view quickly on this?
I think
I think it depends on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Eddie.
Yes, I think at the high level, it depends on various factors, but I think it could make it work. But when one look into the investment economics, is only one of the factor. There is also a discussion around the certainty of the policy going forward, as well as how SKK Migas and Indonesia is taking it forward in terms of foreign investment coming in. Right? Obviously, I think in the past months, past years, we have seen players actually exiting the country itself. Well, almost, not 100%. Then it actually warrant a question around what are the policies, what are the incentives that one could put in place on top of just the gas price to attract the investment. But I think at the high level, I think there are still quite an interest, especially given the promising future of the gas usage.
Alex or Bu Asti, do you want to address the question?
Nothing more to add to a good answer.
Okay. Ibu Asti, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, the $6 price cap is an interesting one. I mean, obviously they came out with a regulation with the decree, where they changed the various upstream prices and midstream price as well to get to that $6 price figure. But at the same time guaranteeing that government share is kept whole. So there's questions around, okay, they've done it for the existing contract, but I think there's a bit of a gray area in terms of how that applies for new contracts. Where there's no, I mean, if it's still kept whole, what is it then kept whole against, right? You don't have any existing agreements in place or PODs, for example. So, I mean, yeah, $6 delivered is challenging, even especially when with the current oil prices, all the upstream companies are really looking very closely at their investment portfolio. So there's obviously interest in terms of the large demand, the large market that's there, but at the end of the day, it has to make economic sense, right? So, if they can do, if they can keep the investor whole like they've done with the current agreements, can they apply that similarly for any new upcoming investments? Even though we don't know what they're being kept whole against, right? But there's also a question then around exactly what that $6 is. Is it, I mean, the other challenge is $6 flat for 20 years? I mean, there's questions around that as well, because obviously on a real basis, you can't operate on a flat fixed price for the full 10 to 20 years. There should be some sort of, at least some sort of escalation, whether it be inflation. But yeah, it's definitely something that at least from my side, I've been asked quite a bit by a few clients in terms of what it means, what it means for investors, the $6 price cap. So I think there's definitely room for discussion and more clarity around just how are they going to apply that price cap for incoming and new investments.
Okay, I think at the end of the day, the investor will need a certain rate of return to put their money, and also taking into account all of the risk profile and so on. So apparently 2 hours has passed in this interesting webinar. I kindly invite Alex and then Bu Asti and at the end Pak Edi to deliver the closing remarks.
Sure. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to engage. I think a good, deep discussion, and I think one, really highlighting both the challenges and the opportunities in Indonesia. I think when having these types of conversations, and this is a good example today, you have to go, of course, to policy and infrastructure to really understand what the right enabling environment is and what's needed to provide the right market incentives. But I like to sort of close these conversations with a note of optimism as well, and of encouragement around what industry participants can do, and the role of innovation, not just in technology, but in new business models for enabling access to gas, promoting new investment in infrastructure, and ultimately, creating new markets. I think we've seen that in other instances around the world, and fundamentally, in Indonesia, where you have such a rapidly growing economy and therefore primary energy demand, and also urgent needs, right, for greater energy access and access to cleaner fuels, and in a number of instances, that's the right context for innovation. So I think steps that can be done to really unlock that, to create that potential, to start small and build incrementally in ways that, on this call, many of us can't even necessarily think of or conceive of. Right, there is no, as I mentioned before, there's no sort of one answer. It's really about creating environments in which different entities, different individuals can find different solutions, and gas can fit into that mix. So I think if there's one lesson to sort of take from what we've seen in other markets and some of the now emerging success stories, I think it's that. Again, government and infrastructure are critical, but the story doesn't end there, right? It's about innovation among everybody else and creating those enabling environments. So I'm quite encouraged, from just following these discussions over the past several years and seeing some small but important, I think, incremental steps in Indonesia for really thinking about expanding the role of gas domestically and the benefits it can provide.
Bu Asti, thank you, Alex.
Yeah, just following on from Alex's comment, obviously, as an Indonesian, as a gas practitioner in the Indonesia market space for the past 10 years, when I was there with ExxonMobil, and I think I see all the comments in the chat there. I think a lot of us here know what the challenges are already, and have been trying to work at it for the past few years. Maybe to lesser degree of success than we would have liked, but I think there's obviously now that everyone, we all know what the challenges are, then it's just a matter of, it might feel like we're pushing against a very strong wall, but you know what they say, you just you keep trying to push it, keep trying to find new ways and innovation, whether it be a technology innovation or the business model innovation, looking at what other markets in the region has done, and hopefully looking at the experience, we can apply it within Indonesian context and see, like, if someone has done it somewhere else, hopefully that provides some sort of confidence within all the stakeholders that we should be able to do it in Indonesia as well.
Thank you, Bu Asti. Pak Edi.
Yep. I think thank you very much for the opportunity for sharing, as well as discussing with everyone in this group. Clearly, I think also everyone is very passionate on how to make it work. And I think echoing what Ibu Asti also mentioned, challenges are well known. Then it's a matter of how we continue to innovate to solve it. I think 2 points from my side. I think number one is when we look into promoting gas switching, then I think key takeaway for me is looking at it from the cost parity perspective. Yes, but it should not be the only metric we look at. There are other factors that one may consider in order to push for the further gas development in Indonesia. I think that's one. I think second is innovation is important. At the same time, it needs to be combined with the top-down push from the government, as well as the SOE from the policy and the infrastructure needed in place to actually grow gas in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Edi. So my takeaway at the end of the session is, as we conclude from all of the discussion, I think the gas with the least carbon footprint energy now is become more affordable and accessible. Now is the time where the LNG and gas price is becoming cheaper, and this is, I think, the right momentum right momentum so that we can reinforce again the collaboration of all of the stakeholders, the government, the gas players, to promote the utilization of gas. So there are many opportunities ahead of us. We can explore more on the switching of in the fuel generation. We can power generation. I mean, we can also explore more on the other sectors, new sectors such as the transportation, the cooking, the city gas, and also the small scale LNG. Of course, I mean the collaboration of all of the stakeholders, the industry, innovation, and the acceleration of gas infrastructure needs to be put in place. So I think the collaboration of all stakeholders in the gas industry is aligned with the mission of IGS. So to wrap up this event, I would like to thanks again, especially to Alex. Have a good night over there. And then also thanks to Pak Edi from BCG, Bu Asti from Wood Mackenzie. Also special thanks to the chairman of IGS, Pak Didik Sasongkowidi, the board advisory of IGS who joined here, and also I see Pak Salis, Pak Michael Baskoro, all of the secretariat team. And also not to forget, thank you very much to everyone who joined the event until the end. I can see that the numbers of the participants is still quite significant. Thank you to be with us. So thank you to the speakers. We'll see you in the next IGS event. Don't forget to subscribe the IGS YouTube channel and follow our Instagram for more updates and information about our upcoming events. Have a good night, have a good day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, Pak Rahmat.
Thanks,
Terima kasih.
everyone.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Bu Asti. Thank you, Pak Edi.
Thank you.
Terima
Thank
kasih.
you,
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone who already joined this webinar. The presentation we will share, I think, in this. I don't know if it is possible. We will share through this chat room.